Many different mythologies have a god or goddess who controls the sun. In Greek mythology, they have Helios. In Egyptian mythology, they have Ra. In Roman mythology, they have Sol, as well as many other different mythologies. As you can tell, gods of the sun are very popular. The sun itself is also represented as a powerful weapon that a lot of characters use to strengthen themselves. Such characters are Mavuika from Genshin Impact and Escanor from Seven Deadly Sins. These two characters are very powerful warriors of the sun, and they have shown many times that they are incredible warriors. Hello everyone, I'm Dusty, and today I'm giving you a video that I have been really excited to make. I enjoyed making my other videos, but this is about a versus debate that I hold as a very interesting one and extremely underrated. So much so that I spent the most amount of time doing research for this video as any other video combined. In this video, I will be taking the Pyro Archon, Mavuika, from Genshin Impact, and the Lionset of Pride, Escanor, from Seven Deadly Frames. I mean sins. Seven Deadly Sins. I'll be putting these two into the arena and deciding which warrior of the sun will come out on top. To do so, I will be comparing their strength, speed, durability, IQ, experience, and their abilities to come to a final verdict. Before we begin with their stats, we need to talk about their backstories, starting with Mavuika. Mavuika is the Pyro Archon of the nation Natlan. However, she wasn't always the Archon. She was born as just an average human living her life in Natlan. She lived a normal life until she earned the privilege of being granted an ancient name, which is a special title passed down from generation to generation, which are associated with heroic deeds and cultural history. Mavuika's ancient name was Koizgozai. Once Mavuika had received this ancient name, she began to lead the people of Natlan, eventually ascending to godhood and becoming the Pyro Archon. However, Natlan was faced with grave danger. A great war that would happen in 500 years by the hands of the Night Kingdom was about to be thrown onto the land of Natlan. Mavuika made a great sacrifice by giving her body to the great flame which powered the Circle of Life, which gave Natlan time to prepare for the war. She was then resurrected in the present day, where she would fight the war, and with the help of the Traveler, pulled Natlan to victory, and finally letting the nation rest in peace. Escanor was born as a frail, timid prince in the kingdom of Castelio. One day he received a mysterious power known as Sunshine, which gave him an incredible power. He was feared for his immense and uncontrollable power. Even his own parents feared him. Escanor then left the kingdom and lived a life of isolation, away from everybody, even the people he loved most. He was then recruited by Meliodas, who saw great potential in Escanor. It was when he joined Meliodas where he finally found a sense of peace. Despite his overwhelming pride in his power, he remained humble and deeply insecure. Now that we got their backstories over with, we can get to the main event. I will be comparing their stats to decide who the strongest warrior of the sun/fire is. Let's start by talking about their strengths, starting with Mavuika. Mavuika is incredibly powerful, as is her status as an Archon, which is Genshin Impact's version of a god. She was able to fight Capitano, who was the strongest Fatui Harbinger, and being said strongest Harbinger, he would be stronger than the other Harbingers, such as Arlecchino and Sagnora, which would scale him to around country level. Mavuika also absorbed the energies of the 6 heroes of Natlan, which allowed Mavuika to surpass the other Archons in terms of strength. The strongest Archon, Zhongli, has also stated that Mavuika rivals the other gods like himself, so Mavuika surpassing the other Archons is a reasonable assumption to make. With her new levels of power, Mavuika was able to shatter the false sky of Teyvat with relative ease. This would scale Mavuika's strength to planetary levels. Before I move on to Escanor, I want to talk about Mavuika's signature weapon called 1,000 Blazing Suns. This weapon potentially has the power of multiple suns or stars inside of it. There are also statements that could potentially back this up. For the sake of this video, I'm going to be using the scaling for Mavuika, but not her physical strength. This would just be her overall strength. So overall, this would scale Mavuika's physical strength to planetary, but her overall strength to either multi-solar system or galaxy level. Escanor has very consistent solar system levels of strength. Escanor was able to deal lots of damage to full-power Demon King Zeldris, despite being weaker than him. As well as in the one ultimate form, he was even able to overpower Zeldris. Escanor was also able to bring Rosa, sorry if I mispronounced that, to his knees with a single punch. The same Rosa, who was able to hurt post-revival assault mode Meliodas. So yeah, Escanor would scale the solar system. So who's stronger? Escanor is far physically stronger than Mavuika, and it's not a contest. However, with her weapon, 1,000 Blazing Suns, Mavuika would actually be stronger overall. However, I'm hesitant to give her strength due to needing an outside force. To compromise, I'll give physical strength to Escanor and overall strength to Mavuika. Now let's talk about speed. Mavuika doesn't have many speed feats to go off of. However, despite that, she has a very good one. While not outright obvious, Mavuika would reach FTL speeds. We can take her fight against Capitano and do some calculations using the pixels on screen. I'll quickly explain it for you. Mavuika in this specific frame, which you can see on screen, is exactly what you can see on screen. Mavuika is about 10 pixels in height, and her movement router is 946 pixels. She was able to reach Capitano in about 42 frames. Assuming the cutscene is playing at an average of 60 frames per second, Mavuika covers her distance in about 1 frame. We can also see this playing out from Kenichi's point of view. After you do all the calculations, you would get a final number of 1,696,773,175 meters per second, which would get her to FTL levels of speeds. This would put Mavuika's combat speeds at faster than light. She would also have a motorcycle that she uses to travel and also uses in combat, which can potentially help her move faster, although I doubt it. Although it is fast enough to be able to drive on water. Escanor is a pretty fast character himself. He was able to land a blow on Zeldris faster than he could dodge, as well as being able to keep up with Chantler and Cusack. This would put Escanor's combat speeds at a range between sub-relativistic to relativistic. This is Escanor's most consistent speed feats. However, an argument can be made for Escanor being FTL. Mainly in the one form and the one ultimate form by being able to keep up with full power Zeldris. However, this is only during noon where Escanor is at his peak of strength. Considering Escanor needs special conditions to be FTL, he would realistically scale to relativistic speeds. In most scenarios, Mavuika would take the edge in speed. Her FTL levels of speed is faster than Escanor's consistent relativistic speeds. However, if this battle were to take place during noon, and Escanor was in his the One or the One Ultimate forms, they would tie in speed. Although I'm giving the edge in speed to Mavuika due to not needing special conditions to reach said levels of speed, unlike Escanor. So Mavuika would take the edge in speed. Now let's talk about durability. Mavuika's durability isn't impressive at a face value. Before she absorbed the power of the 6 heroes in Atlan, Mavuika would only have country levels of durability due to her fight against Capitano. After the ritual, Mavuika was able to fight and take hits from Gosoyoth in its base form, who was superior to Mavuika's full power after the ritual, which is, like I said earlier, planetary. She was also able to take hits from full power Geosoth, which would scale her durability from planetary to potentially large planetary. She was also able to handle the power of Ronova, which has been stated to be able to destroy the Abyss, as well as making the host stronger than any Archon, further backing up Mavuika's planetary levels of durability. Escanor's durability is equivalent to his strength in the sense that it also scales to solar system levels. Escanor was able to take multiple blows from full power Zeldris, as well as an enhanced attack from Meliodas. Escanor also took a massive beating from Estarossa, which would have very easily killed somebody of high caliber like Escanor. Zeldris is a character who at his full power is able to easily injure people like Meliodas, who at the time scaled around solar system to galaxy. So yeah, Escanor would take durability pretty easily. While Mavuika can take hits from near godlike entities, it still isn't enough to compete with Escanor's ability to take hits from characters like Zeldris and Meliodas. So as it currently stands, Escanor has the edge in physical strength and durability, while Mavuika has the edge in overall strength and speed. Let's see who has the edge after we talk about the last few stats. Let's move on to IQ. Mavuika is a very intelligent warrior. She was able to successfully lead an entire nation for many years as its Archon. She is also a tactical genius who was able to form war plans to fight back against the Abyss in the war. Her plans were very successful. It's also been stated that the Sacred Flame gives her a bunch of information from past ancient name holders, as well as Mavuika being able to master 30 years worth of battle experience in just a year. She also has excellent observational skills, being able to not only study her own combat style to see flaws, but also study her opponent's fighting style. Escanor doesn't have many showings of extreme levels of intelligence. He, however, is not a dumb fighter by any standard. He is very skilled and cunning, who is able to very easily get under the skin of his opponents. In other words, he is a master rage baiter. He was able to recite multiple poems while in the heat of the battle, while still fighting at peak performance, which shows high levels of multitasking. The only thing that pulls Escanor down is how prideful he is, which would tend to get him distracted if it is his sole focus in battles. Escanor, while being a very decent fighter, is inferior to Mavuika in terms of battle IQ and experience. Sure, Escanor is very cunning and could potentially get under Mavuika's skin. Mavuika simply takes the stat in IQ. Due to being able to successfully form complex war plans and being able to rule an entire nation by herself. Another benefit in Mavuika's favor is that she can draw from not only the experience but information of other ancient name holders and the Sacred Flame, which is also why she would take the edge in experience, since Mavuika, like I said, can take the experience from past ancient name users. And she also would take the edge in experience due to fighting a lot longer than Escanor. While Escanor has fought a lot of opponents, and Mavuika was not conscious in the 500 years she was in the Sacred Flame, Mavuika, as being a war general, would have a lot more experience than Escanor. For the last stat, let's talk about their abilities. Mavuika has a lot of powerful abilities on her side. Such abilities are corruption immunity, fear inducement, memory absorption, soul absorption, power bestowal, connection to the spiritual plane, supernatural detection, fire manipulation, flight, enhanced memory, portal creation, spatial destruction, telepathic communication, life force augmentation, shield penetration, lava and water walking, and weapon summoning. Mavuika also has some equipment to back her up in combat. Mavuika has a very powerful ability that can help her potentially turn the tide of battle. Upon death, Mavuika can resurrect herself through the sacred flame, giving her another life. For the average Natlan resident, you can be revived an undefined amount of times to the sacred flame. However, Mavuika, despite not being the average resident of Natlan, has never been stated on having a limit herself. This essentially gives Mavuika infinite lives and a form of immortality. She also has some equipment, such as her signature weapon, her claymore, known as 1,000 Blazing Suns, which I talked about earlier, but also her motorcycle, which is another form of transport for her, which allows her to traverse over water and fly, despite her being able to do that without her motorcycle. This also potentially further increases Mavuika's speed. However, I feel like she's faster without it, and it's just simply another form of transportation. Escanor, like Mavuika, has a bunch of abilities under his belt. Such abilities are superhuman physical characteristics, non-physical interaction, meaning he can interact with ghosts, he can interact with spirits, and other things of the sort, extrasensory perception, regeneration negation, fire manipulation, light manipulation, air manipulation, flight, absorption, empowerment, and weapon summoning. He also has resistances to fire and heat manipulation, soul manipulation, mental manipulation, absorption, his own regeneration being negated, possession, and resistance to the 10 Commandments, which wouldn't really have an effect on this battle. Escanor also has his signature weapon, the Divine Axe Rita, which allows Escanor to store extreme amounts of heat to release later. Escanor also has alternate forms he can access. His first form is called his Night form, which is when Escanor is at his weakness. In this form, he is a slim and frail human that makes him basically useless in any combat scenario. His second form is his Day form, which is his most common form that he uses in most of his fights. In this form, he's a massive, very muscular man with all of his abilities and aura farming tendencies. His third form is called the One, which increases his strength and durability by an incredible amount. However, this form is only accessible during noon. His final form, the One Ultimate, is only accessible at noon. And this form is also Escanor's strongest form, which even further increases Escanor's strength and durability. However, it comes at a cost of consuming Escanor's life force, which in the show ultimately led to Escanor's death. So who wins? Well, it's very hard to come to a decision. While Escanor is far stronger and durable, even without needing to transform into his other forms, Mavuika is faster, smarter, more experienced, and has a form of immortality. With Mavuika's low levels of durability, Escanor can very easily one-shot Mavuika if he's able to land a hit, but she could just come back with the Sacred Flame. However, without her weapon, Mavuika can't hurt Escanor at all, and even if it's destroyed, she can just remake it. Mavuika is much faster than Escanor at a base level. However, Escanor can close the speed gap with his One and the One Ultimate forms. Escanor also has an entire minute of invincibility at noon, but in the end, a minute is not long enough to make that much of a difference. This is probably the closest fight I've ever talked about, and I struggled to come to a decision on who wins. So I decided to look at this from two scenarios. The first scenario is using all the stats and abilities I gave to the characters in this video, in which case the winner would be Mavuika with extreme levels of difficulty. This is only because Escanor can't put her down permanently or bypass Mavuika's ability to constantly revive herself with the Sacred Flame. And Mavuika could just keep coming back and use her extreme levels of analysis to eventually overwhelm Escanor and finally come out with the win. And even though she has very low levels of durability and most likely would die in one hit, she has an infinite amount of lives. So she could just keep coming back, keep analyzing Escanor, and with her superior speed in most of the time, would eventually overwhelm Escanor and eventually come out with the win. However, the second scenario is where I remove Mavuika's ability to revive with the Sacred Flame, which would be more closer to what the canon of Genshin Impact is, most likely. Which, if I remove this ability, then Escanor would win with a very low difficulty. Due to Mavuika's low durability, like I said, Escanor would just be able to one-shot Mavuika. Even despite her speed, he can just transform into the one form, which would tie in speed, and all he would need to do is land a single hit, and then he would win. Heck, even without transforming into the one form, he's still way stronger than what the hardest hits Mavuika could handle. So the winner really just depends on whether you let Mavuika use the power of the Sacred Flame. However, with the stats and abilities I established in this video, and giving Mavuika access to the Sacred Flame's unlimited revival, the winner of this video is Mavuika, the Pyro Archon with extreme difficulty. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is probably the closest versus debate I've ever talked about so far, and it was very fun to make. It was the hardest and longest video for me to make due to how much research and script writing I had to do. If you disagree with anything I said in this video, or want to say who you think wins, make sure you comment down below, and I'll make sure to read your comments. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm Dusty, signing off.